In this example, we are preparing Mandy Green's salary for week 1 to 4 of the tax year. We are going to prepare her salary on the cumulative basis using tax deduction cards. Before we begin, we can see that Mandy has a weekly tax credit of €70.38 and a weekly standard rate cut-off point of €700. If we look at her salary for each individual week, we can see that in each week her gross pay exceeds her standard rate cut-off point. So that will mean each week we calculate a portion of her gross pay, that is anything in excess of €700, will be taxed at the higher rate. So for example, in week 1 she will be able to earn €700 at 20% and the remaining 50 will be at 41%. The same applies for week 2. In week 3 she will be able to earn €700 at 20% and the remaining €100 will be at 41%. And in week 4 she will be able to earn €700 at 20% and the remaining 200 at 41%. Once again, €700 being her cut-off point, and that being the maximum she can earn in any pay period at the standard or 20% rate of tax. We now look at week 1 of Mandy's salary. In week 1 her gross pay is €750. Her gross pay to date is also €750. Her standard rate cut-off, or the amount she can earn at 20%, is €700, which means the remainder of her salary, which is €50, will be taxable at 41%. So we multiply €700 of her salary by 20%, which will give us €140. The remaining €50 of her salary is multiplied by 41%, which will give us €20.50. So by adding together the tax at the standard rate and the higher rate, her total tax this period is €160.50. We then take away her tax credit of €70.38, which will give us cumulative tax to date of €90.12. And because we are in week 1 of the tax year, her tax in this period will be €90.12. We now look at week 2 of the tax year. In this week, Mandy earns an additional €750, bringing her cumulative pay to date to €1,500. Because her standard rate cut-off point is €1,400, a portion of her pay to date, which would be €100, will be taxable at 41%. So we have €1,400, which will be taxed at 20%, which will give us €280, and the remaining €100 of her salary to date is going to be taxed at 41%, which will give us €41. By adding together the standard and the higher rate of tax, we are given a total tax of €321. We then take away her tax credit to date, which is €140.76, which will give us a cumulative tax figure to date of €180.24. And to get the tax for this particular week, we subtract the cumulative tax to date from the previous week's cumulative, which will give us €90.12. And when we add the two individual weeks' tax together, it should equate to the cumulative tax to date figure. We now look at week 3 of the tax year. In week 3, Mandy earns €800. Her gross pay to date is now €2,300. Because her standard rate cut-off point is €2,100, this means that a portion of her gross pay to date of €2,300 will be taxed at 41%. So that portion will be €200. We then multiply her standard rate cut-off point of €2,100 by 20%, which will give us a figure of €420. We multiply the portion of her salary that will be taxed at 41%, which is €200, by 41%, which will give us €82. By adding the standard and the higher rate together, we are given a total tax figure of €502. We then take away the tax credit to date, which is €211.14, giving us a cumulative tax to date figure of €290.81. In order to get the figure of tax for this particular week, we subtract the cumulative tax to date, which is €290.86, from the previous week's cumulative tax, which is €180.24, and that will give us the figure of €110.62. We look at week 4. In week 4, Mandy earns €900. Her gross pay to date is now €3,200. Of this €3,200, €2,800 is the amount she will earn at 21%, and the remaining €400 will be taxable at 41%. So by multiplying 2,800 by 20%, that gives us her standard rate of tax, which is €560. And by multiplying €400 by 41%, we get €164. When we add the standard rate and the higher rate of tax together, her total tax to date is €724, and this will be her gross tax figure. We then subtract her cumulative tax credit to date, which is €281.52, giving us a cumulative tax to date figure of €442.48. In order to get the tax for this week, we subtract the cumulative tax figure to date from the previous week's cumulative tax figure, and that will give us €152.62.